let me start with the presentation. So why urbanization studies, or why we should study all these things? Because I know today's lecture will not only expose you to this area of discipline, but I'm going to get some scholars to work with me if I'm successful or if I'm good. It's a good competition which ISP has created. Is it visible? Am I audible clearly to everybody?
Yes, Professor.
Great. Yes. And in between, you can stop me anytime. Don't worry. Correct? So if you have any comment to make, any question to ask, correct? You can just stop me and ask me, no problem. So urbanization. All of you must be knowing, but if not, then now at the end of this 2-hour session, you will know that there is an unprecedented space of urbanization during 20th century, last 50 years, more specifically, 1950 to 2000. Entirely changing our world. Many of you must have born just in 1990s or some very young, maybe millennial, means after 2000 or 2001. So before you coming on this earth, urbanization has changed it, and it is further changing, and it is going to change in next 50 years completely. So it has changed human geography beyond recognition. What we had, you just can't imagine. You will have to go through the journey of the history, entire thing, correct? It is something like those scientific movies, science fiction, and we see that there is a spacecraft or the new thing, some 2200 AD, correct? Guardians of the Galaxy, there he says that earlier. So that kind of a thing. Something for you, this urbanization is something like that. If your grandfather, great-grandfather is there, then he could give you an entirely different picture of the world than what it was 100 years back. And 21st century will be century of the cities and urbanization. It's a make or break of human existence. The kind of entire civilization we had for last 8,000-10,000 years, correct? It is going to be different, and therefore study urbanization. It's a very exciting field. I never intended to get into this field. By accident, I came in this field, but I have no regret. For last 30 years, I am on a roller coaster of studying this urbanization and entire urban phenomena. I never ever imagined when I was in college doing masters that I will be in urban sector. Accidentally came into urban sector, and then something, it so happened that I was at a right side of the development and right point of the history that I was there. So let's see how it is unprecedented. Widespread, all pervading urbanization is truly 20th century phenomena, and it is going to, what we can say, encompass entire 21st century. Rome was the first. Then after that, 1800 AD, London becomes the 1 million city. And these are some statistics, and you can see in percentage terms, it was at the beginning of the 1900, just 15%, 250 million people. And today we are talking of 3.4 billion people in urban areas. It is so unprecedented that world is not going to be a rural anymore. In 2008, 50% mark was crossed, and now world is urban. And it is going to be more urban and more urban. No more rural, correct? So such a 2.1 billion people in urban areas got added in 50 years. And they are going to get added in next 30 years only. Out of that, 20 years have passed already. So by 2030, Already 2.1 billion people will get added in urban. It is creating such a huge challenge. It is the fulcrum of many modern things. All this IT revolution, all this globalization, at the bottom of it is urbanization. So this is what shows the how in the entire world and different regions and different countries. See, European countries went for urbanization late 19th century. 1850 to 1900 was the time when European countries faced the urbanization growth. North America, 19 to 1950. South America, mainly late part of the century. Asia, 2000 to 2030, including India. And Africa will come into gear 2030 to 2050. So till 2050, urbanization, even though many part of the world have reached to the saturation point, around 70% of urbanization it tapers, and then its growth is very slow. But the plateau will come at around 70-75%, correct? But it is going to go. So these are the different regional dynamics, and different regions are developing in different way. The fulcrum of as a urban population, I said, is shifting now from Europe to and North America to the Asia. So these 30 years, last 20 years and another 10, 20 years are of Asia, and then there Africa. In fact, 6 of 10 countries with largest urban population as of today are in Asia. And the kind of cities we were knowing, New York, Paris, London, they are nowhere now. Only New York is maintaining the situation. Tokyo and all Asian cities are the megapolis, real. And there will be some more megapolis from Africa very soon. So at present, half of the urban population of the world lives in Asia, and it will be the majority of the urban population of the world in future. 2.7 billion urban population will be in Asia, and all other regions will have urban population of around 2.3 billions only, when we'll reach to the 6 billion in urban population. In fact, whole world by 2050 will be 70% urban. World population may stabilize around 9 billion, 9.5 billion or maximum 10 billion. That is what experts are saying. But out of that, 6.5 or 7 billion will be urban. Look at the growth of mega cities. I said 1950, only one city, New York, was there with the 10 million population. Today, in 2015, 12 out of expected 21 cities with 10 million or more population will be in Asia or are in Asia by 2020. 17 cities. These are the urbanization trends. This PPT is going to be with you. Correct? So don't worry. And it is also getting recorded, I think. I think this lecture is getting recorded, no?
Yes, yes, it is.
Okay, great. So you will have that also. So you can see how things are changing in percentage term. This is regional dynamics of it. India, though it is 41, but there is a hidden population. World Bank report says that we are already beyond 50%. Because our urban definition and other aspects, so though it appears 41% we will be reaching, but we are around 55% urban. This is what shows when we crossed 2008, we crossed, and up to 2050, how urbanization is going to increase and will reach to the 70%. Let's come to the main point. Why to study urbanization? Not only because so many people are going to live into it, and we are urban. I don't think very few of you may be having a rural background or upbringing in rural areas. We are all urban product and going to be part of urban, except some of you decide to go in a rural. But rural is now only in physical terms rural. Otherwise, all norms and all these things have culturally, because of the IT and because of the TV and other things, have reached to the rural areas. So rural is not that pristine rural, at least in cultural and social context, correct? It may have low density, it may have less of the infrastructure and all those fields and agriculture products and agriculture farms and all those things. But at a cultural, at a social level and other norms and all that, urban has already reached over there. It's not something very pristine, rural kind of a life, correct? So urban is becoming pervading. It is going to be the running thread across all part of our life. I don't want to give mind-boggling figures, but they are there. And they are going to pose future challenge. And if you are coming out as a policy makers, it is real challenging how to have an urban policy. In fact, for information, Government of India or India doesn't have urban policy till date. Only last year it has put urban policy, draft urban policy for discussion on the web. And they are not calling it urban policy, but they are calling National Urban Policy Framework. So you being the policy student, we require a right policy. I don't have to tell. We require right policies and then institution, then legal structures and the implementation machinery to fathoming this challenge. Because urban population is a two-edged sword. Per se, urbanization is not a problem and it's a natural process. Also, nobody will be able to stop it. There have been theories, and sometime you may be listening that we should stop people coming to the cities, we should stop the urbanization, gaon ki taraf chalo, let's go towards the rural. Nothing is going to work. And urbanization is not a process of just last 100 years. It has changed the scale, but it existed 8,000 years back in Iraq, Mesopotamia. First urban feature came in. And from that onward, urbanization is the epitome of the human civilization. Tell me any person who doesn't want to move from village to the urban and from small city to the larger city and from larger city to the bigger city and from Bombay to the New York and from New York to the London. It's a very natural tendency. And in economics, whatever processes we have, primary process of wealth creation, secondary process of wealth creation, primary is agriculture and the mining, and the secondary is of creating manufacturing. But where comes the service industry? Service industry, that is the third process of wealth creation, is possible with the urban only. And in entire our human civilization history, what we talk of is of the cities, urban cities. And future also we are going to talk of that, and that is going to be this thing. But it has a challenges. So we need urban policy makers. What really is the problem of urban India? We don't lack technocrats. There are nice engineers, there are bureaucrats. We lack urban managers to manage our cities. We lack policy makers to have the right kind of policies to tackle these urban problems. And this is not the case with India. Across the world, it is not named problem, but it's there, and every country has to fathom its urbanization. Next aspect is addressing the climate change. Unless until you address your cities, climate change is not going to get addressed. So by 2050, I said 70% of the people will be staying, that is 6 billion people, and their utilization of the carbon and everything. If we really succeed to have our cities which are carbon neutral, if we really succeed to have the kind of development model, the kind of urbanization, the kind of urban infrastructure, which will not be like a black hole. Today, our cities are like black hole, taking everything into it. Instead of giving away to the hinterland, they are sucking. They are not sucking everything from outside of future generations also. Unless until we change the existing model of a exploitative urbanization, exploitative in terms of resources, in terms of natural resources, world has no future in terms of it. So we will require a new kind of urbanism. We will require entirely new kind of a technological solutions for urban to really do this. And look at this Peter Kaltroff. I'm repeating him. What a beautifully he has said. Getting future of the cities right is at most necessary to get the future of the world right. And therefore I said, it's a make or break century. And urbanization is the cause of new future or of doomed future. So unless we set right our cities, we can't control CO2 emissions of 70% of the population. So real answer lies in the cities. Fundamentally, the way we shape the cities is the manifestation of the kind of humanity we bring to bear. Today, the kind of violence we are seeing, the kind of exclusion we are seeing, and all of you must have seen recent migrant exodus. People just leaving our cities and going back to this. Why? Why they started walking back? Why such a mistrust? Why those 3 crore people felt mistrust on the cities that these cities will take care of us? It is because of our cities are exclusive cities. They were here, but we were not aware of them. Ask today a question to yourself. Were you aware of the migrant problem before this migrant episode happened? You must have seen them working in an auto garage. You must have taken your vehicle to get it repaired. You must have got something welding done. You must have got some textile thing, some domestic worker. All migrant, part of city life, but excluded. And that mistrust on the city, they started walking back. So that is kind of a humanity we have created. So setting cities right will make the climate change possible. And not only climate change. I said cities have been the epitome of each era human civilization. We remember Harappa and Mohenjo-daro. We remember Rome. We remember Athens. We remember X, Y, Z. That city, and that city tells of that civilization. Forgotten civilizations. So kind of humanity, the kind of human civilization in future we'll have depends on the urbanization and tackling it the way one should be. Let me give you why we study urbanization. Your and my economic well-being, and not your and mine, of everybody, is dependent on city. There is a positive relationship between the urbanization and growth of our economy. Look at the world. All the developed countries have more than 60% of the urbanization. All developing countries have around 25 to 35% of the urbanization. And all poor countries in the world have 15 to 20% of urbanization. Why to talk of world? Let's look at in India. You can read the census report, it has shown, but let me give you mota or broad. All the urbanized states which are having more than 40% urbanization, Maharashtra, Karnataka, Punjab, Gujarat, are the rich states of India, most developed states of India. All the middle states are the middle urbanization states, and all the poor states in India are those states which have urbanization around 15% or less than 20%. So economic prosperity or economic growth of the world, from where this globalization become possible? It is those 2.1 billion people 1950 to 2000 getting into the urban and developing the service sector industry. Correct? So urbanization urbanization promotes economic, this kind of, at the same time it gets promoted. So it's a, what we can say, complementary relationship. Economic growth leads to urbanization, and urbanization leads to the economic growth. Not necessary always. Sometimes urbanization leads to the economic strain also. So it's a population shift. It's relevant for many disciplines, and you can see that urbanization gets promoted by economic scale of production. Manufacturing requires larger settlements of the people. Entire branch in economics talks of agglomeration economics. So urban is basically agglomeration economics. Then the existence of information externalities leading to the agglomeration economics, technology development, building, transportation, substitution of the capital for land, and with the growing importance and role of service industries, urbanization increases, and urbanization leads to, again, economic opportunity. This is some details which I said, that urbanization and economic growth are linked. However, impact can be negative and positive, both. We come to know only negative impact of urbanization. But per se, urbanization has no problem. It is how you manage the urbanization. That will really work out whether it will have positive impact or negative impact. It has negative impact, but those negative impact can be constrained or contained, or positive impacts can be enhanced by having right kind of a policies and right kind of a implementation. So this graph clearly shows where India is. Of course, this is a little bit old graph, 2012 something, but India, the way for India's economic growth goes towards the urbanization. A tectonic change has to happen. We have excess people underemployed in rural sector. And we have almost 65% or 60% people on agriculture sector producing only 15% of the GDP. It's not their fault. The real problem in India is that our cities do not have capacity to absorb the people. Because till 2000, we had anti-migration policies. And even today, we do not have very positive policy for migration, urbanization. It's now not anti, not positive kind of a status. Yes, 2005 onwards, government is pouring in money in urban areas, because writing on the wall is clear that if India want to become economic superpower, it will have to have a double-digit GDP growth rate over 15 to 20 years. Don't go by 5 trillion, that benchmark. That is not going to tell that India becomes superpower. It's a one figure. India become economic superpower only if we are able, and we have been able to reach only 8.5% maximum growth rate. Or over 15 years, we averaged around 7.5%, that golden period from 2000 to 2015, correct? But 2017 onwards, we are sliding down. So 5 trillion economy is just benchmark. It doesn't make you economic superpower. And India cannot have double-digit GDP growth rate unless until we sort out our urban cities problem or our urbanization problems. That's writing on the wall is clear. It become clear. Way back, you can read 1996 India Infrastructure Report, correct? It for the first time brought into the notice the economic importance of the urbanization. Before that, National Commission on Urbanization 1988, which paved the way for 74th Constitution Amendment and some changes into this. But to tell you the fact, till 2000, for the first time in the year 2000, Finance Minister of India talked about the urban, that we also need to develop urban because it can contribute to the economy. Till that point, it was something like a taboo to talk about urban. Nowhere in policy statement and government statement urban will be said, because then you are elitist, you are capitalistic if you are talking of developing the cities. And we went on ignoring cities and cities. And today central government every year puts around 30,000 crore in urban infrastructure or in urban system. Way back in 2004, its total devolution was 350 crore. Just you can imagine. It is the JNURM, that is Jawaharlal Nehru Urban Renewal Scheme, announced in 2005. But again, it addressed in isolation. The policymakers thought it is the issue of non-availability of the funds or the resources, monetary resources, to sort out the problem of urban infrastructure and this. But they were wrong. Just opening the purse by state and central governments and central finance commissions hasn't solved the problem. Actually, wastage of resources have happened. More wastage of resources have happened. And I say that there is earlier everybody was starving in India, but a person were surviving the starvation. Okay? We felt pity of him, brought him at home, gave him a good bath and all that, and then gave him a very highly rich food or dinner. And in the morning, he died of a diarrhea. So entire Indian urban system today is going through the diarrhea. Money is getting spent without improvement in the service level benchmarks. That has happened. That is the sad story post 2005 in urban sector. Anyway, urbanization and poverty levels are also related. What really happening in last 30-40 years in world is the urbanization of the poverty, because rural poor moving to the urban areas. So today, in absolute number, urban poor are more than the rural poor across the world and in India also. And urban poverty has a dehumanizing angle. Any of you gone to the village? Go to the village and you will find there may be a very, very poor person, but living in a small hut, not in inhuman condition. In city, look where the urban poor stays. He stays on a corner of the railway lines, in a floodplain areas, on the banks of the nalas, in the heaps of garbage, and in a dehumanized way. In Bombay, in one room, people, 8-10 people will be sleeping, just having a place for sleep. And that too, in those who in the night shift, they go out, and the people who have worked in the day shift, they sleep, and then they go for the the day job. Then the night shift people return, those 8 people. So 16 people use 8 by 10 square foot room. Those were the migrants. So it has both dimensions. It has dimension of economic prosperity, economic growth. At the same time, it has a dimension of dehumanized conditions, living conditions, loss of identity, all those things, correct? So, but at the same time, urbanization is the solution to reduce the poverty, not of urban areas, even of the rural. In fact, 10 years back, UN Habitat had one annual year tagline, rural prosperity through urban development. In fact, one of you can take that as a topic for write-up. I don't know when you were, but that hypothesis has a validity. The rural prosperity through urbanization or urban development. So what is most important is managing the urbanization. You can't stop it. You just can't take an ostrich attitude, which we took for 70 years or 60 years. Last 10 years, we haven't really corrected the policy level. What we have done is started giving the money, but without correcting the policy, without correcting the laws, that is the legislative aspect, without correcting the institutional aspect, and without correcting the capacity aspects. Only money aspect we have tried to address, but it is something putting more water in leaking bucket, resulting into more leakage. So there are also then inequalities. See, Bill Gates and all those super rich is again an urbanization phenomena. In rural areas, you can't become so much rich. So inequality is the byproduct of urbanization. But again, there is a solution in that only if you make inclusive cities, if you make the just cities, equal cities, again there is a solution. So city or urbanization is a cause of a problem and solution of a problem. And it has to be, solutions have to be from urbanization only. Because future, whole world is going to be urbanized. And that there comes this entire exciting discipline. Everything goes into it. In fact, we call that America is a melting pot. Take my word, urbanization or urban studies is the real melting pot of all the disciplines in the world. Everything goes into it. Politics, economics, sociology, anthropology, technical solutions, everything. Name any discipline and it goes in urbanization or urban studies. Correct? I am selling my subject. Okay? I have to do it. Somebody may ask how psychology goes. Where are the psychological problems? It's the urbanite people who have the psychological problems. In villages, there are very less. So everything goes into it. So they are engines of economic growth. They have been engines of the human development, human civilization. Human civilization going to the next stage has happened with the urbanization. New waves of urbanization, correct? Somebody will say industrialization. Yes, industrialization triggered the urbanization. Way back in 16th century, it triggered urbanization. And that urbanization again created an agglomeration economics for which industrialization was required. So industrialization progressed, more and more applications were required to be found because urbanization happened. So it's a vice versa correlationship. Again, this shows that increasing urbanization can propel India's economic growth because that is the experience all over the world and within India also. Look at urbanization, level of urbanization of each state and level of economic prosperity or economic growth. There may be more inequality in Maharashtra, in Gujarat, correct? Maybe less in West Bengal, Orissa or Bihar. But everybody is poor more and here everybody is more rich, correct? So, and it creates those problems which should attract policymakers. How to overcome, how to use same problem, that urbanization which is a cause of a problem, how to use urbanization through policy solutions and other solutions as a antidote for those problems. So you have to play with the same material. This way you can see that we can. Let's come to the cities now. Jane Jacobs has beautiful books, book one, and there is another, Death of a Nation, Cities. All through organized history, if you wanted prosperity, you had to have cities. Cities are places that attract new people with new ideas. I have changed thanks to using her style of writing. All through future times, if you want sustainable development and sustainable world, you will have to have sustainable cities. World has no future unless until we make our sustainable cities. And very well, you must have seen the Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs. 11 number sustainable goal is sustainable cities. And if you will see that 11 number goal, it's almost linked with all the other sustainable development goals, directly or indirectly. If you look at all the sustainable development goals, then you will find that sustainable city goal is almost linked to others. Ban Ki-moon also says sustainable cities are critical to reducing greenhouse gas emissions and meeting the economic and social needs of the people worldwide. So 21st century is going to be centuries of the cities. We are seeing phenomena, 20 million, 30 million people cities. They are state in itself. If you will take Bombay, then India's 10 states together is equivalent to the Bombay city. All northeast states, Sikkim, add Himachal Pradesh, add Jammu and Kashmir, all these mountain states, they put together their entire budget and everything. Bombay Municipal Corporation budget is bigger, and still Bombay doesn't cover entire Bombay metropolitan area. There is a Thane Municipal Corporation, there is a Panvel Municipal Corporation, there is a Vasai Virar Municipal Corporation, Mira Bhainder, there are 8-10 other municipal corporations. Same Delhi is growing so fast. In fact, it may go beyond Bombay also. So 50% of the global GDP comes from 600 cities. In India also same kind of asymmetry is there. Our top 65 cities almost constitute more than 40% of urban population. Correct? But at the same time, remember, future of cities is going to be future of all. That is again I am saying, future of the world and humanities. It's not n number people. City is a living organism. It grows, and there is now phenomena of declining cities also in US. We have only exploding cities, but as a policy makers and as a professional, there is another new phenomena which if you'll study, if some of you migrate to the US, then you may come out with a city which is decelerating. Detroit, Bridgeport, Boston went through the bankruptcy, Philadelphia. So cities have gone up and cities have declining also, disintegrating also. Correct? So there are different phenomena. So city after all only means a way of life. More than ever, life happens outside the home. You and we all stay, forget about this COVID time and we are missing all these things. You are in your house only for 6 or 8 hours. 2/3 of your time you spend outside in the city. So the city should be designed in such a way that your life become pleasurable when you go out. Due to COVID, we have been stuck into the house, and who knows, new normals will be there. But still what we are missing is going out in the city. So as I earlier said, we have to study cities for addressing poverty also. Because 6.1 billion people, there are 1 billion people who are abject poor, correct? Out of that, 75% stay in urban areas. So where is the real poverty? It is in the cities, it is in urban areas. Then if you take a slum population, there is a difference. 1 billion, I said, those people who are poorest of poor, abject poverty, or very poor. Out of that, 750 million are in urban areas, 75%. But 1.3 billion people of existing 3.9 billion people, that is 1/3 on an average, are in slums. May not be very abjectly poor, but living in a very poor countries, poor way, state of affairs or life. I said already, poverty is getting transferred to the urban areas. And it will continue because as more and more poor will migrate to the urban areas, urban poverty will be on a rise. Very interestingly, as I said in policy statement, if you see, then 2 years back, I saw this statement, Economic Survey of India. Very recently, I said, no, our public document has started. And this was a very important sentence for me because in entire life, I saw this for the first time. By all accounts, urbanization will define the trajectory of the Indian development. Very strong statement, very correct statement. But coming in 2017, I again utilize that to put forward, by all accounts, sustainable financial strategies will define trajectory of achieving sustainable cities and sustainable developmental goals by India. Otherwise, that is Indian cities are, and then another statement again in that, cities that are entrusted with the responsibilities, empowered with the resources, and encouraged by and encumbered by the accountability can become effective vehicles for unleashing dynamism, so that to competitive federalism, India can add and competitive sub-federalism. Very beautiful sentence. But this is the real situation in India of our cities and our entire urban governance. Our cities are not entrusted with the responsibilities. They are not empowered by the resources. Sometime when we'll actually talk on urban, all this will come, and are not encumbered by accountability. And therefore, our cities, our urban governance in India is ineffective, inadequate vehicles for unleashing dynamism and innovations to achieve sustainable urban development. Because such a colossal neglect of our urban governance systems and cities. In fact, it is the cities only where participatory democracy can become possible. If you really want participatory democracy and participatory government or governance, cities are the real where both government and citizens are close to each other. Their proximity to each other is so much that if they decide really, they can participate. Even you must have seen Black Lives Matters, where the agitations are happening. Even the conflicts happen at the city level. The message goes to the government at the city level only. So conflict and the communication and the participation. So if we really want a vibrant democracy, real democratic decentralization, participatory theories, participatory this, then it has to be city and city and city.
Sir?
Yes.
Yeah. Is it possible I can just ask a question in between?
Sure. I have said.
Yeah. So just in the previous slide, you just mentioned a word regarding sustainable financial strategies. So what does that mean? Any example or something?
In fact, that statement I had prepared for my municipal or urban finance lectures, all that. See, our cities are not financed through the sustainable financial strategies. In fact, our cities are 90% dependent on state government and higher level government devolution. There is no financial autonomy. Now, many of you have economic background, they will understand the concept of the cost exportation or the tax exportation. In fact, I many times jokingly says that a rural person in his life without visiting urban area actually pays the cost of urban. Because when city is not raising, there is in public finance footprint, like ecological footprint or carbon footprint concept. There is in the economics, you must know the public goods and the cost benefit spillover, correct? theory of Musgrave and then Samuelson, correct? It's a of public goods. Now, it essentially says that the cost and benefit footprint should match each other for local areas. So the cost of particular city should not spill over to the other areas. Means the people staying in the city should finance that cost through the taxes and other thing, correct? Now, let me give you example. If a particular city gets 80% money of its cost from the national level and the state level budgets, the national level source of taxation is the GST and the income tax. State level again, which are, so, and then tax is paid by entire India. Whether that excise, whether that sales tax, whether, so when state level and national level tax instruments fund the city development, the statement which I made happens that other people in his life never visiting urban area, he actually pays the cost of maybe fraction, but pays the cost of that city. And then cities are like unsustainable black holes, sucking everything. Look at our water pricing. Urban citizens want that water should not be costly. As soon as, and politicians are not increasing prices of the water charges. Many cities, in fact, across the India, barring some exception, you get water delivered by municipal bodies. It's say 15 paisa per liter, while you merely purchase 1 liter water at 15 rupees outside. Now this water which is brought to the city has a ecological cost and economic cost. But we are not even paying the financial cost. That is the O&M or CapEx. It has an economic cost because it has alternative usage. Same water can go to the industry. Same water can go to the irrigation. Correct? We are not factoring that cost, and therefore so much water wastage because, and exactly you go to the developed countries and the cost of water is so high. So what we are doing? We are doing our cities, their services financing in an unsustainable way. And not to talk of environmental cost of bringing water from hinterland to the city. And what city is giving? Across the India, we are treating only 15% of the water, sewage water. So the 100% of the 100 liter water, 80% would be a used water. And out of that, only 15% or 20% get treated. So we are giving back to the hinterland a pollution. That is what I'm saying, unsustainable way of financing, unless until we see complete, this will not be possible. Cost and benefit footprint matching cannot be possible 100%. Some cross subsidization will be required for the cities, because at the same time cities create the economic wealth, correct? For example, our cities or urban population contributes 65% of the GDP, which goes to then rural areas, means it funds the rural areas and other infrastructure, because 30% or 35% of the urban population creates 65% of the GDP. But let me give you example, very concrete example. Do not link it with the regional pride, correct? Because sometimes, now Mumbai has around, Mumbai agglomeration I'm talking. There is a Mumbai agglomeration which has some 1.5 crore or 15 million population. And its annual expenditure is something say 50-60,000 crore, including Bombay Municipal Corporation, then Thane, Panvel, all those, and municipalities also. I'm talking of an urban agglomeration. But you know, if they are spending 50,000 crore, none of the municipal body was getting even more than 5% of the government grant till 2017, till GST came in. So it is the people of the metropolitan area of Bombay and Panvel and Thane, Kalyan, Dombivli, everybody, they were spending almost 100% of their OPEX and even of CAPEX, but some CAPEX was coming in a form of a cross subsidization. Take Calcutta. Calcutta has 41 ULBs, Barakpur and all those, too big, Calcutta and Howrah. But if Calcutta and equivalent population, 1.5 crore or 15 million, 16 million, Bombay and that, if we take a larger metropolitan areas, both places. And the cost will be similar, or it is similar. It is little less maybe because low level of infrastructure supply in some aspect compared to the Bombay. Assume 40,000 crore, not 50,000 crore. But all the people paying 10,000 crore. So all their ULBs, 43, recover only 10,000 crore or 15,000 crore, and it is West Bengal government from state resources gives that grant subsidy, correct, to the Calcutta metropolitan area people. Result, a small person, a individual a rural poor staying in a small village actually pays for the cost of Calcutta metropolitan area to the extent of 70% or 75%. Maharashtra people also pay cost of Mumbai metropolitan area, but zero for OPEX and some percentage for CAPEX. That is what is the sustainable way of financing, matching the footprint of cost and benefit in public finance, which is not there across the India, because across the India, all municipal bodies together, put together, their municipal own source revenue is 40%. And in that, our urban finance is so skewed that Gujarat, Maharashtra and some other municipal corporation, they constitute 75% of the universe of the municipal finance. So if we take away those 30, 40 cities, then we have almost 4,400 cities. If these 50 cities are taken away, then 4,400 cities are almost 80% dependent. See, cost never goes anywhere. There is no magic wand in the world to mitigate, to wipe out the cost. You can mitigate it. So cost is there. What we are doing, all Indians are paying indirectly the urban cost. Because cost is there of managing the urban. It is the question who is paying and how much who is paying. So in Bombay, the local taxation is so high. And in fact, Bombay per capita property tax is 2,000 rupees per capita. It actually more because 40% or 30% who live in slums are exempt from that. So others are paying much more, correct? Come to the Patna and the annual per capita income from property tax is less than 130 rupees. Now cost may be compared to the Bombay 1/2, but it cannot be 1/10 in terms of revenue. Now somebody has to pay that cost, correct? Cost not paid by one person has to be paid by somebody else. That's the universal truth of materialistic world and financial world.
But sir, considering this governance framework is not new to India, it's been for long that this tier 3 kind of a structure is going on. So I just wanted to understand, is there any single example which any urban body or anyone has been able to, any city has been able to come up with this sustainable financial strategy? Apart from like bonds, municipal bonds and all, I don't find anything.
municipal bond is not at all a sustainable financial strategy. Municipal, when I talk of a municipal sustainable financial strategy, means to the maximum extent possible, municipal bodies raise their own sources to fund their cost of this. And because that is not done, we do not have Tybalt theorem working out that cities offering X kind of a, people will just walk what he said by foot, because then, and we do that. Of course, we have less that kind of a mobility, but given the mobility, where you will move? You will move in a better part of the city, which is less cost, but value for money is there, or you may change even city. Today, our entire changing of the city is because of the job. So even if you don't like a particular city, you never thought that I will have to live in that city, you will go for there because you get the job over there, because you require a job. But given the opportunity, you would go to that city which offers or which mitigates the your vision or dream of the city life. Correct? So this, I belong to the Baroda. We were really sustainable. When I was chief finance officer, and after that I resigned in 2002, I had such a audacity to tell government of Gujarat that release my money by 31st March, each and every single naya paisa, because I am not at all dependent on you. Not a single rupee I get from you. In fact, I do some of the works as an agency function for you. So sustainable financing is where you are cost efficient is the first thing, because cost is the fulcrum. So first you are cost efficient, and then you manage with a right kind of a taxation and user charge policy. You raise enough resources, then you have a surplus. In a sense, you raise enough resources, you are cost efficient, then your OR is around 7, you maintain your operative ratio around 0.7, or you have a surplus of 0.25%, and then you leverage it. Municipal bond is a leveraging this thing. It's a secondary resource. First, what you require acid test is that you have to have a surplus. And any government organization to have a surplus must control its cost without controlling or constraining the output or the welfare. Means you should not reduce the quality. Compensating quality and quantity, you must control the cost by avoiding the wasteful expenditure. And there were examples. Even today, Ahmedabad is doing well. Only thing is, we have a paradox. We have 20-25 cities which has enormous capacity, but they are not delivering what they can. Means they can truly be global cities of that high standard. For example, Bombay today Bombay balance sheet is so strong that it can stand 30,000 crore rupees debt, but it doesn't have single rupee debt. So it's not leveraging. So problem is that they are not bringing development upfront. Ahmedabad, same thing. My one student did the study, and we conclusively said that yes, Ahmedabad has spent in last 5 years, every year almost 2,000 crore rupees, have topped in JNURM and all that implementation. Good thing. But we said that without compromising financial sustainability norms, every year it could have spent another 1,000 crore. And it hasn't leveraged that money, hasn't spent that, and hasn't. So somewhere पप्पू पास हो गया, हमारे पास syndrome है, बस पास हो गया. And if you get 60% marks, great. क्योंकि पास होने के ही लाले हैं पहले. Getting passed is a problem. आप पास हो गए, पप्पू पास हो गया, तो let's rejoice. And somebody gets higher middle class 55%, bale bale, great. We are not aspiring, and we are not creating that kind of a conducive environment that those who can score 90% will score 90%. Because that again becomes a capitalistic, elitist, correct? We are not creating lighthouse. In fact, Smart City Mission says that these 100 smart cities will be the lighthouse. Unfortunately, that is one of the most, I don't want to use word, but it's one of the most useless scheme ever designed. My writing is all there. I have written many papers in public domain. My public lecture is also there on Smart City Mission. It is one of the disastrous scheme, wrongly conceived. Amrut is much better. Correct? It is not going to create the lighthouse. It may end up creating the bankrupt cities. Some of the cities which were there capable, and more dependent cities on the national, because entire Smart City Mission, out of that 70, with the case of 76 cities, it is totally unsustainable way of financing. But let me stop here. Good question. I reserve it if you join the urbanization, because there is a lot to speak on that. And I don't want at the moment to go in details of that. But then, yes, sustainable way of future life, including financing. Because, see, what we are talking of a sustainable world, climate change and all that, that is going to become possible the way financial solution will come out there. Today we are saying solar is now this. What is the tipping point? The days solar technology become cost effective and compared to the other fuels, coal and petrol and other thing, its per unit cost has dipped down. Any technology, anything has to first cross the technological breakthrough as an innovation. Second, inflict point is becoming capable of replication, mass replication. And third is the crossing the financial sustainability, or their word utilize the financial viability inflict point. Unless and until a technology becomes financially viable, it will not become an order of the day. So it's not like that solar technology is new. For last 70, 80 years, all technological innovations are to reduce the cost, its mass replication, its productivity. What is productivity? Improving its technical productivity means reducing the cost of production per unit. So we need finance is a running thread across everything, and urbanization. And therefore, urban finance is the future running thread through each and everybody's life in every aspect. But our urbanization is trails in global average, because we neglected our cities, anti-migration, anti-urbanization mindset. Look, unless until we make our cities capable of absorbing excess population in rural area, and I'm saying absorbing means not the way today our cities are absorbing them in a dehumanized condition, people then staying in slums and that, no. We need to have capacity in our cities to legitimately absorb the people, migrants from the rural economy or rural sector, both way, in terms of livelihood and in terms of life. That is the quality of the life. If that happens, then the real India will become real economic superpower, and we will be able to catch global average. We have been consistently underperforming in urbanization. These are some statistics about urbanization in India. We had 31% of the total population in 2011, maybe around 40% or 38% in 2021. Then there is a hidden urbanization of India. World Bank report is there, which actually puts it much higher level. We may be today around 50%. There are peri-urban areas and other urban areas which we don't recognize. In fact, we have created such a perverse incentive that states don't declare urban areas as the urban, because there is a more money available in rural areas under the rural mechanism. Look at, we have 7,933 urban settlements as per census definition. But the municipal statutory towns are 4,041. Now they must be 4,500 in last 10 years. In fact, 14th Central Finance Commission came out with a scheme in devolution saying that 50% weightage will be number of the statutory towns vis-a-vis the number of the census town in the state. So while distributing the resources, devolution of the Central Finance Commission, they took two parameters: urban population of the state as the percentage of the total urban population of India, and number of the statutory towns as the percentage of the total towns in India. So because states are not converting urban areas, in fact there are 1 lakh population towns also, villages also, which are not converted into urban areas. Then there are below poverty line people, 25% do not have access to the adequate doorstep water. This percentage may have come down because of the Amrut. Government is claiming that at the end of the Amrut, it may go down to the 10%, 19% do not have access to the latrine. That has also come down. But we have declared more than 3,300 cities as open defecation free cities, which is not a correct thing. You can see that in any city, but definitely not to take away credit that menace has been controlled much to larger extent, and Swachh Bharat mission definitely has improved in last 5 years our urban sanitation situation. So sewerage system is only in 250 cities, then 29% capacity for wastewater treatment, and 40% solid waste gets scientifically treated. Rest of the just we are dumping. Absolute housing shortage is something 3.9 million units, 39 million units, not 0. 18.8 is a relative, and out of that under PMAY, they are thinking that, means government is saying that by 2024, we'll have 10 million units constructed. So future urbanization, why current spending on urban infrastructure is only 1% of the GDP. I have given that talk. You can listen to that video to the earlier batch of your scholars, Urban Finances India Present Status. It is there on YouTube also. There is a podcast by the Indian School of Public Policy on urban policy. Our GDP growth will be dependent on the cities that you know, as I said earlier. But we will realize that kind of a thing only we will be able to address our cities, and we are going to have next 20 years up to 2050 lot of urbanization influx, because if at all everything goes well and we become capable of improving capacity of our cities, then more people will come. So challenge is not going to end. It will only tapered by say 2030 or 40 particularly, because just now we are hoping that we will have something 550 million or more, but what is expected is that by 2030 we will have almost 55% people staying in urban areas, and till 2050 we are going to have urban influx, and we'll have to address our cities the way world has to address the urbanization. India is not different. As I said, there is a sustainable development goal 11, that is sustainable cities, correct? And what new vision it is saying? City has to be inclusive, safe, resilient, and sustainable. Sustainable in the context of financial sustainability and climate change and environment, and resilient in the terms of disasters, because even if we will, by end of the 21st century, if human civilization or humans are able to correct the imbalance which we have created in last 300 years, if all those things succeed, particularly 2050 to 2050 to 2100, then problem we will have some kind of a utopian world at that time. Till that time, more and more cloud burst, more and more heat waves, and all those things are going to happen, which we are seeing in last 10 years. More and more hurricanes are coming. California is burning. You can see every day. In Australia, a lot of fires happening. In cities, there will be problem, water shortages and all that. So resilient, that word. So this is the four kind of visions. This sustainable cities development goals is saying that make city inclusive means equal also, because urbanization create inequality. Make it safe for everybody, make it resilient and sustainable, as I explained earlier. Other expectations also there from the cities: basic services for all or cities for all, fair and equal city, that is the gender. Just now, very recently, different kind of agitations taking place: cleaner, connected, affordable, green garden, eco cities, competitive cities, smart city. You use any adjective, because that adjective we would love to have to our city. So at the moment, future of the cities presently appear bleak. So many odds are against, because the kind of influx it is going to happen, the kind of resources governments will have to commit, correct? And so much needed to be done, because not only in India, most of the developing countries had anti-urbanization attitude. So it has suffered across all developing world, and still there are underdeveloped countries where that new process has to initiate. But the only hope is that by 2065, whatever new cities will come, those 80% of the cities have not born yet. So there we have a chance that right from the beginning, with right kind of a policy, legislation, institution, and the capacity kind of a network or framework, hierarchy, if we address all these aspects, then probably the new cities which will come and existing cities can be renewed, correct? Transformative technologies using that and concepts. But next priority is to create dense cities which offer much more of what people seek in suburb. If we really this goes, then work from home and all that may reduce some of the burden on a transport, but then you will require more spaces for the recreation and people coming together. We at the moment in India are developing our roads as if only for mobility, taking people from one place to another place. But the function of the road is meeting of people, communication, mingling of the people, which was the function served by the roads in our earlier cities. Means when you will, today even we walk, we don't talk to each other. That's a different thing. Few people walk, everybody goes on two-wheeler or everybody goes on four wheels and all that. And then there will be a traffic congestion. So again, you will shut the car, have AC on and be in that cubicle. Public transport not good, so you can't travel by the public transport and all that. So somewhere this intermingling human aspect, our cities are missing. We will have to put that back into it in urban planning, in policy and everywhere. But there is a hope, because 80% of cities haven't born. And then we will be able to do. Then luckily we are now adopting this sustainable development goals and the sustainable city concept. It has made a beginning. Then Habitat 3 conference has happened, correct? Has framed that new urban agenda. Have a look at new urban agenda and adoption of implementation. In fact, new urban, UN urban institution has come up. Till now there was a UN Habitat, but Habitat means rural and urban both. So we have got a new institution which will come into action, but all countries have ratified, and now UN Urban, which will be separate from UN Habitat. Earlier, urban was looked after by the UN Habitat because it was habitat, urban and rural both. So exciting things are happening. Different kind of monitoring systems are coming up. Sustainable cities index, resilient cities and index, opportunity for city livelihood. In fact, the government of India has also introduced livability index. How many of you are aware? So we have, and we rank cities on livability indices. Maybe imperfectly, but these concepts are exciting. They will become new normal. They will become order of the day. So there is a hope. These new things are coming up. 25 cities have committed to the emission normal by 2050s. That is carbon neutral cities. Correct? That even may increase. And then, then there is this, when you start committing to these new concepts, such an exciting thing, designing the sustainable city index, resilient cities index, or many new concept, urban planning, renewal, correct? All this is exciting for me, and every day it keeps me busy reading new things. I think my point, there is a hope, and we need new people, the torch bearer, new students who will take urban studies and urban sustainable urbanization possible, who will make